Okay, it's about 11 o'clock, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We really do not have a panel this morning. What we're going to do is give two more traditional type of academic research conference presentations, and then just have questions at the end. And we decided initially in the initial schedule, these were in separate hours, and we just decided to combine them. So I'll take approximately the first half hour with the presentation that I'm doing on building interdisciplinary research teams. And then Dr. Smolsky is going to be presenting on our collaborative work with the Rural Advancement Fund International. So that's kind of what's on the agenda for this morning. I don't know if anyone is there actually live in Tally. I'd just like to ask you to hold your questions towards the end. And with that introduction, I will share screen and get this going. Although I'll ask if anyone has any questions or issues before we start. Okay, well, let me share screen. The background for what I'm presenting today, oops, sorry about that. The background of what I want to present today really draws upon what's called the science of team science literature. This has become a mature area of scholarly investigation. For example, there is a specialty conference on the science of team science. And you can even find a science of team science toolkit online at the National Cancer Institute, which I think reflects that the interest in this area oftentimes came from multidisciplinary teams in the medical sciences, particularly scientists study cancer. So one can find specialty conferences, one can find toolkits about how to do it. In kind of a very kind of general overview of the literature in this area, my review shows two types of studies. One type of study are case studies of actual multidisciplinary teams working together, where serendipity is an important factor. And what I mean here is that in these case studies, they often start off with something like Professor A meets Professor B informally in a coffee shop. They start to talking. They find out that they have shared interests. One is writing a grant and the other is asked to join the grant team. The other set of studies that one will also find in this literature are studies that use network mapping and including some of the new quantitative network mapping methods, where multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary teams go back and look at how they form their groups and their networks. Actually, I remember several years ago, at least in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, in the departments, we actually did some mapping, both within our department and with also in terms of our contacts with other departments. What I'm going to do today is present a case study of team network building in an applied research equity project. And the data I'm using is highly idiosyncratic. It's based on my personal notes and memory, and going back and looking at a review of PINS proposals that were submitted approximately from 2013 to 2016. And they reflect my personal experience within one department, Youth, Family, and Community Sciences. That was our old name. I'm using it because it was the name that was relevant during this 2013 to 2016 time period. And I have to admit that there's the extreme possibility of selection bias and flawed memory. Again, I'm relying upon my personal notes and memory, and I will fully admit that there could be all sorts of intentional and unintentional biases included in this kind of recollection. I'm purposely not identifying any faculty colleagues or departments or specific projects. I have informed my colleagues of these presentations, but I'm not naming names or mentioning anything that perhaps allow one to track these kind of issues backwards. I am going to use, rather than network and serendipity, the community capitals framework, particularly the concepts of bonding, which involves forming network interconnections with people who roughly occupy your same position, and bridging, referring to the ability to form networks and interlinks with people who represent different positions. So again, this is highly idiosyncratic, but I think there are some important issues that we can learn from my flawed memory about how to build interdisciplinary teams to work together on applied research equity outcome projects. I think first of all, and I'll get back to this at the end, it's important to understand the structural context of the Youth, Family, and Community Science department. First of all, it's a multidisciplinary department. It includes people with backgrounds in sociology, education, counseling, and the hard sciences. So it's already multidisciplinary from the beginning. Second of all, basic and applied equity research coexist. Many of the faculty have extension appointments, and they're engaged with a variety of different community partners, both formal organizations like local county extension, but also many community groups and networks. So it's multidisciplinary to begin with. Basic and applied research coexist, and extension and engagement are in a certain sense normal. The other thing that's, I think, important to understand about the background and structural context of the department is that junior and senior faculty have program and leadership responsibilities on these different extension and engagement, basic and applied equity research programs. So in a certain sense, the structure here is important because it already has created an environment for multidisciplinary engagement, community outreach, basic and applied research. Oops, let me go down. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. In terms of reviewing this process of building an interdisciplinary team, I refer to the building of the core team. The core team bonding is stage one. Stage one, again, here refers to, in a sense, the creation of a core team within the Youth, Family, and Community Sciences department of a group of faculty who were relatively new to working with each other as a group. Not new in the sense of being brand new PhDs or just out of their graduate programs, but new in the sense of not having worked together as a group. And this is, I refer to this as bonding because it refers to faculty who were all within the department of YFCS. Again, in my recollection, we started working in 2013, and we worked on 4 proposals that were not accepted, that were unfunded. It really wasn't until March of 2014 that we had our first funded proposal. It was a proposal dealing with community and local food systems. And the point I wish to make here is that the failed proposals and project work enhanced trust, skills, and the ability and the capacity of the team to work together as a functioning group. So the failures, in the sense of submitting proposals that were not funded, allowed us to know one another, learn each other's skills, learn how to communicate with each other, develop trust, and then the capacity to work together and move forward once we were able to get a funded proposal. The second phase I refer to as bridging, which involves team expansion. Bridging in the sense of engaging faculty outside of the department. Yes, indeed, other faculty, but people who are not part of the immediate bonding network within YFCS. And the core team, in response to new requests for proposals, started using their personal networks to invite new faculty from other programs to join an expanded team to respond to new opportunities. So using personal networks, people that you knew or perhaps had worked with on some other project, we built an expanded team. And again, the team submitted unfunded proposals, this time dealing with community and healthy living. And again, the process of working on those unfunded proposals built team capacity. Again, just like in the first phase, but this time with more people, we learned how to work together, to trust each other, and to build our capacity to respond to proposals so that in June of 2016, a proposal that we submitted was funded. This was a 2-year proposal. The team hit the ground running. And again, I think this is one of the important points about the failures. We learned to work together so that when we finally were able to get a funded proposal, we moved forward very quickly. The project was completed in 2 years. Efforts to maintain some of the local impacts of the program continued, while after the funding was gone, team members moved to other projects. Sorry about that. So basically, looking at these bonding and bridging processes, here are some results. Team member recruitment. I refer to a classic article in sociology called The Strength of Weak Ties by Mark Granovetter, which was published in the American Journal of Sociology back in 1973. It's actually a study of networks involved in job search and how do people get jobs. But the point that Granovetter making is that having a big network of people that you aren't necessarily completely 100% tied into in a sense of having worked together, published together, eating together, having what's called weak ties. And weak is not in the common sense of bad. Weak means more distance. That groups with lots of distant ties can be very strong because you can draw upon a broad network of people with skills. In both the bonding and bridging stages, the failed proposals build trust, skills, and the capacity to achieve networks, to achieve the objectives of the project. Over time, the faculty networks that were built evolved and disevolved with project work and different funding. So yes, indeed, while there was a core team in both the bridging and bonding processes, different members came in and out as they responded to other opportunities and as the project work and the funding moved on. The other point in terms of talking about bridging and bonding is that different members of the team brought in different community networks which enhanced the capacity for the equity outcomes of the project. So building, in a sense, the team was not only important for the academic side of the research, but also for building the community networks and the capacity to create and do the work. So concluding remarks, context matters. Working in an interdisciplinary department with community engaged projects and networks and basic and applied research was a distinct advantage. We did not necessarily have to do a lot of preliminary introductions to try to understand the value of interdisciplinary work and working with community partners. It was assumed. The other kind of important context factor is that many of the junior faculty involved were not completely dependent on one set of project outcomes. My junior colleagues had other projects that were producing the basic and applied deliverables, so that the failure of a particular proposal did not necessarily really negatively impact their careers. Yes, certainly having everything funded all at once would have been better, but it was not a zero-sum game for them. I think that's a better way to phrase it. In addition, the senior faculty were able to take risks, to invest in projects and proposals that may not have a payoff for 1 or 2 years without necessarily being hounded about what they're doing. Some other issues to think about: funding matters. One question in terms of doing this work is, how do you maintain the continuity of your community impacts, particularly when the core funding for your group ends and people need to go off and get involved in other projects to keep their research programs and their other projects going? Another interesting question that I'll raise as a hypothesis is whether or not the demographic composition of a department or a program has an important consequence for the ability of teams to work together. YFCS was a majority female department, and I don't know if anyone's done any research on this area, but whether or not, it's applied and basic research among interdisciplinary teams matters based upon the gender composition of the department or the program. I'll raise that as a hypothesis. And finally, one concluding comment. Oops. Final thoughts. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
I don't think that the attendees can open their mics to speak with us, and I don't see yet anything in the chat.
Yeah, okay, then yeah, thank you. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Okay, good. Well, then I'll really pass the electronic microphone only on to my colleague, Dr. Andrew Smolsky, and he'll pick up with a slightly different type of presentation, but one that does highlight a community engaged project.